Do you live in God's house? I get the impression that most of us Christians, as we read Psalm 127, we view it as a promise by God to us for individual blessings within our families, as long as we follow the principles expressed in the psalm. But I ask the question, is that what this psalm is really about? In view of the songs of ascent, that is Psalms 120 through 134, I think we need to understand this psalm as pointing to something much different than just a promise of individual blessing. Psalm 127 refers to the house that the Lord builds. In view of Psalm 122 and Psalm 134, as I've shown over here on the left-hand side, and in view of Psalm 122, 3 through 5, that is the end of that passage. The house here has kind of a double entendre that is referring to the temple and also referring to David's line, merging those two ideas together so that this psalm would point us to the reality that is shown by a temple, that God would come to be and dwell among his people, and that that dwelling would be through the person of Jesus Christ himself, for it is out of the line of David that the Messiah would emerge, and it is the Messiah himself that would bring forth God's house, his dwelling, to reign on the earth with his people. The city then refers to Jerusalem, that is Zion, as promised in Psalm 1:2 and appearing several times throughout the Psalms. The words children and offspring, you can see those words highlighted in the bottom half of this psalm, refer to the line that is the sons, Solomon and beyond, that would follow David. Out of eventually, or out of the line eventually would emerge the Messiah himself. And so this psalm is actually looking forward to the reign of the Messiah as he lives with his children, so to speak. For we see in Hebrews chapter 2, I encourage you to go to that passage, that the writer refers to Isaiah chapter 8, in which he says that that particular passage in Isaiah actually speaks about Jesus, stating that God has given him children. In line of that particular statement in Isaiah chapter 8, Hebrews 2, in conjunction here with Psalm 127, the children referred to in this psalm are not just the individual children that we raise within our families, but the people of God themselves. So this psalm, in referring to the house, is referring to God's overall plan in history to bring forth the Messiah, so that the Messiah would bring forth his dwelling to the earth, that is, his presence, and within that dwelling, within his presence, the people of God, those who put their faith in Jesus Christ, the Messiah, will live in his presence and be able to claim themselves as a part of God's family. And so I ask you again, in whose house do you live? This psalm isn't a challenge to us Christians. Are we in on God's plan to build his house? Do we work by ourselves thinking we can accomplish the task of bringing forth his kingdom without his work overseeing and guiding the entire process? Are we joining with him in living out the gospel, proclaiming the gospel, praising Jesus Christ himself, his son, because of the gospel, or are we living unto ourselves, seeking our own goals and trying to glorify ourselves? Unless the Lord builds the house, that is the house in which he has invited us to participate, we would fail, but Jesus Christ will not fail. For as all the Psalms do, this psalm looks forward to his reign with his people. If you do not know Jesus Christ, I exhort you, come to know him. Turn from yourself, embrace him in faith, and become a part of God's house.